before Europe had its Renaissance, before the Ottoman Empire reached its peak, before anyone had heard of the Americas, there was a continent that the rest of the world had completely underestimated, a continent that did not measure wealth in coins, or castles, or conquest. It measured wealth in knowledge, in gold that flowed like rivers, in cities so advanced that visitors from across the world arrived and wept at their beauty, in kings so powerful their names made emperors nervous, in people so brilliant they mapped the stars while others were still afraid of the dark, and at the very top of all of it, one man, one name, one story the world tried to forget. Mansa Musa, the king who showed the world what Africa really was. Forget everything you think you know about medieval Africa, because the image the world has been sold of a primitive, undeveloped continent waiting to be discovered is one of the greatest lies in human history. West Africa in the 13th century was electric. The Ghana Empire had already risen and fallen, leaving behind sophisticated trade networks, legal systems, agricultural mastery, and oral traditions so powerful that entire libraries existed inside the memories of men. Those men were called griots, not simply storytellers, living archives, walking encyclopedias, trusted advisors to kings, keepers of lineage, law, and legacy. In a culture where knowledge was not locked behind closed doors, it was spoken, shared, sung, passed from generation to generation with perfect precision, free to every ear that would listen. While European kings hoarded knowledge in Latin manuscripts that their own people could not read, Mali put wisdom in the mouths of men and sent it walking across the continent. This was not a continent without history. This was a continent where history was sacred. Musa's bloodline flows directly back to Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali, born into royalty but dismissed from birth. His legs were weak. The court laughed. His mother was mocked in the halls of the palace. And then one day, Sundiata rose, grabbed an iron rod and bent it straight, with his bare hands. As his first step, he united the scattered Mandinka people, faced the fearsome sorcerer King Sumanguru Kante, and destroyed the Soso Empire at the Battle of Kirina in 1235, completely, permanently, and built the foundation of the greatest empire Africa had ever seen. This was Musa's inheritance, not just gold, not just land, the blood of a man who rose from nothing, the legacy of a people who absolutely refused to be erased. From the moment Musa drew his first breath, greatness was the expectation, not the exception. Musa was born around 1280 into the royal Keita dynasty in the heart of the Mali Empire. The imperial court was not simply a place of luxury, it was a place of relentless preparation. From his earliest years, Musa was surrounded by the greatest minds the empire had to offer. Islamic scholars who had memorized the Quran in its entirety, military generals who had fought and won across thousands of miles, traders who understood the economics of 3 continents, diplomats who had sat across tables from the rulers of Egypt, Morocco, and the Arab world. He studied theology not as ritual, but as philosophy, a framework for how to govern, how to treat the poor, how to build institutions that outlasted kings. He studied mathematics and astronomy, sciences that Mali's scholars had been advancing while much of the world was still afraid of the dark. He studied military strategy, governance, justice, and above all, he watched how kings carried themselves, how they listened, how they gave. The Mali court had a saying, "A king who hoards is a king who rots, a king who gives lives forever." Musa never forgot it. This brings us to something the history books rarely teach: the way Musa's world understood wealth. In the Mali Empire, wealth was never simply about accumulation. It was about circulation, about responsibility, about what your resources built for the people around you. There is a philosophy that runs like a river through African culture. Ubuntu. I am because we are. Your greatness was inseparable from the community around you. A man who ate alone while his neighbor starved was not considered rich. He was considered broken. A king who filled his treasury while his people suffered was not considered powerful. He was considered a failure. This was not weakness. This was the most sophisticated understanding of power the ancient world had ever produced. Gold in Mali did not sit still. It moved, through trade routes stretching thousands of miles, through markets buzzing with merchants from across Africa, the Arab world, and beyond. Goods, ideas, and cultures colliding and exchanging in marketplaces that made European trading posts look like corner shops. Wealth was a living, breathing organism. It had to move to stay healthy. And Musa understood this better than any king before him. And then there was salt. Today we reach for it without thinking. In 14th century West Africa, it was survival itself. In the brutal heat of the Sahara and the tropics, the human body loses salt constantly. Without it, you die. So rare and precious in the south that traders exchanged it pound for pound with gold. One slab of salt, one slab of gold. Equal, and Mali controlled both. The gold mines of Bambouk and Bouré, the salt flats of Taghaza, the trade routes connecting them both to the world. Musa didn't just sit on this wealth. He understood it, he weaponized it, and used it to build something the world had never seen. When Musa took the throne around 1312, he expanded Mali to its greatest ever size, covering modern-day Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad. An empire of 400 million people, at a time when Europe was being decimated by plague. The city of Timbuktu became the intellectual capital of the world. The University of Sankore, 25,000 students. Astronomy, surgery, mathematics, law, poetry. While Oxford University was still finding its footing, Timbuktu had been educating the world for generations. The Jingwareber Mosque, built on his orders, still standing today, 700 years later, still standing. In 1324, Musa announced the Hajj, his holy pilgrimage to Mecca, an act of faith. But Musa did nothing quietly. He assembled 60,000 men, 12,000 attendants, each carrying 4 pounds of solid gold, 80 camels, each loaded with 300 pounds of gold dust, 500 royal servants, each carrying a staff of pure gold, and Musa himself, draped in gold, riding slowly, calm. As if this were simply Tuesday, cities stopped as he passed. Crowds gathered in silence, not because they were commanded to, because they had never seen anything like it in their lives. At every stop he gave, to the poor, to mosques, to rulers, to strangers. He gave gold like a man who understood that the point of gold was never to keep it. When he arrived in Cairo, he stayed 3 months and flooded the Egyptian economy with so much gold that the value of the metal collapsed overnight. Trade routes buckled, prices spiraled. Merchants who had built their entire lives on gold stability watched it become worthless in their hands. The damage spread across North Africa and the Middle East and did not recover. For 12 years, one man, one journey, one act of generosity, 12 years of economic depression. He didn't fire a weapon. He didn't invade a city. He simply gave and broke the world. Musa died around 1337. His empire began to fracture. The Songhai rose. Tuareg raiders seized Timbuktu. The trade routes were slowly cut off one by one, and the greatest empire Africa had ever produced collapsed. Not with a bang, with a slow and painful unraveling. Then came the colonizers. Who needed Africa to look primitive? Who needed its history to be blank? Who needed the story to begin with their arrival? So they buried Musa, they buried Timbuktu, the griots, the universities, the trade routes, the philosophy, the gold, and told the world that Africa had nothing, had been nothing, would be nothing, without them. It was the greatest lie ever told. But here is what they could not bury: the Jingaraber Mosque still standing, 700,000 manuscripts from Timbuktu rediscovered, the bloodline remembered, the truth unstoppable, Mansa Musa, a boy raised in the courts of the greatest empire on earth, taught that knowledge was power and generosity was greatness, walked across the world and showed every king, every emperor, every nation exactly what Africa was. Not behind, not waiting, not primitive, the origin of everything. Like this video so more people find it. Subscribe so you never miss one. And share it because somebody in your life needs to hear this today.